What is up, guys? It is the Blue Bloods here, back with another Week 9 college football preview right here on YouTube, man. I appreciate y'all tuning in. And man, go make sure to go click our Week 9 college football content playlist to catch up on all our previews, our live mailbag from Tuesday night. And also, if you're new, smash that subscribe button and go ahead and like the video and comment your score predictions for this game below. But we have an extremely important Big 12 matchup going down in Waco, Texas this weekend. That really is a could be a Big 12 championship elimination matchup for each of these teams, as there is a giant race right now to see who can possibly get that second spot between the Big 12 leaders, Oklahoma. But we got the Texas Longhorns traveling to Waco to take on the number 16 Baylor Bears, and the Bears are a 3-point favorite for a game that kicks off at 11 a.m. Central Time live on ABC on Saturday. But when you look at this Big 12 race right now, you've got Oklahoma at number one, but then you have Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Iowa State all tied for second and all with wins like over each other. And so it's a huge, cluster right there at number two. And then right behind them, you have the Longhorns in that next spot with an outside chance to be a dark horse if they can get hot later this season. So this game has so much meaning and impact for that Big 12 championship race. But let's set the stage real quick. The Bears come into this matchup 6-1, 3-1 in the Big 12, and they're coming off a very, very impressive win over number 19 BYU in Waco. But they got a much needed bye week to rest up, get healthy for a stretch run this season. And you got to give props here, man. Dave Aranda has done an outstanding job, really turning around this program. They had a really, really tough 2020 season. They find themselves in the top 20 right now, and they're in contention right now. If things all fall right for them with this crazy season, the way it's been playing out, they have an outside shot to get to another New Year's Six bowl. Their second in 3 years. So this game is really important, and you got to give Aranda and this coaching staff a lot of credit. But on the other side, you have the Longhorns, who are entering this game with probably one of the biggest chips on their shoulder that we've seen all season. They are here after blowing two consecutive second half leads over teams that they really had a chance to beat in Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. So they're looking for a much needed win on the road to really turn around Steve Sarkisian's first season in Austin and really keep themselves in the Big 12 conversation moving forward. This is a must win for the Longhorns on the road. When you look at this series, though, the Longhorns have historically dominated the series, which was first played in 1901, and the Longhorns lead at 79-27. And there's also been four ties in the series. But the last two games have been split. When you extend that out, the Longhorns have won 5 out of the last 6 games in this series. But that's the stage that we have this Saturday at 11. Let's get into the keys of the game. The Bears, it should be obvious. When you look at Baylor, it all starts with that rushing attack. It's been one of the best in the country and and they have one of the most explosive duos at running back in the country as well. And then you also have Jerry Bohannon, who has been outstanding working off the run game, establishing his deep ball, and is really getting the ball to these talented playmakers on the outside of this Baylor's offense. But when you look at the rushing attack, they're averaging over 238 yards per game right now, guys, which is top 10 in the country. And they're averaging over 6 yards per carry, ranks top 5 in the country. And then on top of that, you got a Texas defense that has not been very good at stopping the run, but this is going to be the number one thing this Texas defense is going to have to game plan for, which is this top-notch elite running attack. You look at Abram Smith, 785 rushing yards, over 7.5 yards per carry, and 10 touchdowns. And then Treston Ebner, almost 500 yards rushing, over 6.5 yards per carry. And, he doesn't have a rushing and touchdown, but he does have a receiving touchdown this year. And then on top of that, you have to watch Jerry Bohannon out the pocket, who has 6 rushing touchdowns this season as well. So they can get it done on the ground in a variety of ways. And that's the biggest thing about this rushing attack, guys. It's so diverse in how and where they can attack you. when you look at, the 8 possible gaps you can run when you're looking at football, you got the 2A gaps, the 2B gaps, the C gaps, and then you have way outside. They have over 100 rushing yards in 7 of the 8 possible rushing lanes this season. They're most explosive off the edge, which is something to really watch this weekend. Off the edge, they've rushed for over 600 yards, over 8 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns, over 30 first downs generated off of those, and 20 explosive runs off the edge for the Bears. The Longhorns are going to have to set the edge, going to have to make sure they can tackle these running backs in open space, because all it takes is one guy to miss, and these guys can make a play happen very, very quickly. And that's how they find themselves with only one loss in the top 20 right now. So Ebner, Bohannon, and Smith are going to be key factors, but Smith is having a ridiculous year, and he's been one of the best running backs in the country and really has been a key piece to this Baylor turnaround this season. But as good as the rushing attack has been, the passing attack has been extremely solid this season. They rank number 3 in yards per attempt right now, which shows just how explosive this passing attack can be when the Bears are firing on all cylinders. Now, a lot of teams, some teams utilize the pass to set up the run and vice versa. This team utilizes the run to set up the pass, and it's not even a question. You look at what Bohan has done, working around this season. Over 65% of his passes completed, almost 1,600 yards, 12 passing touchdowns, only 1 turnover, and over 10 yards of completion. He's 4th in the conference in passing yards. He has the least amount of interceptions for any quarterback in the Big 12, as every other starting QB, has over 3 interceptions this season. And when you look at how the rushing attack plays into this, over 44% of Bohannon's dropbacks this season have been off of play action concepts. That shows how important the rushing attack has been to Bohannon, as he grades above an 83 in terms of PFF Pro Football Focus's passing grade off of play action passes. He's completing almost 70% of them for over almost 800 yards, 9 touchdowns, no turnovers, 5 big time throws, and 33 first downs generated. And he works off the deep ball very well off of these, as he has 6 touchdowns, no turnovers, 8 big time throws, and almost a 93 passing grade according to Pro Football Focus on passes 20 plus yards down the field, which is really where they take their shots on this play action. When you look at this, when you look at how Bohannon has developed this year, that's really been a key piece to the puzzle for Baylor that they didn't have last year, which was consistency at quarterback. When you look at this offense, though, the balance has really thrown off a lot of their opponents. I mean, you look at a BYU, they just were not able to handle all the different types of things Baylor was throwing at them. But when you look at this game, it's going to be a key to get the rushing game going, because Texas is allowing over 200 yards per game on the ground, over 5 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns on the ground this season. The Longhorns are 0-3 when their opponents rush for over 200 yards, and they're undefeated when they hold them below that. So if Baylor just hits their average on the ground, they're probably going to come away with the win this weekend, which means the Texas defense has to play their best game of the season. Now, you look at the Longhorns, man. Let's move to their keys real quick. It also lies on the ground. And I've said this before, when you have a generational talent on your team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, you have to give him the ball in these key games. Bijan Robinson is that type of running back for the Longhorns. It should be obvious why the Longhorns should run the football and give Robinson the ball. And they can't also, on the other hand, let Baylor run the ball like they've done this season and allow them to chew the clock, wear down that Longhorn front seven, and control the entire pace of the game. They're going to have to counteract that with the rushing attack of their own. Luckily for the Longhorns, they're averaging over 230 yards per game on the ground, over 5.5 yards per carry, and almost 3 touchdowns per game on the ground. That's top 15 in yards per game, top 12 in yards per carry in the for the season in the country. So it's going to be important to move the ball on the ground. You look at Bijan Robinson, almost 1,000 yards rushing, over 6 yards per carry, and 10 touchdowns. He's the leading rusher in the Big 12, and he's tied second, right now in the Big 12 in the Big 12 in rushing touchdowns, and he's tied with his opponent this weekend. When you look at Abram Smith with also his 10 touchdowns, so they're tied second in the Big 12 right now in rushing touchdowns. But you also have the replacement of Roshan Johnson as well, over 200 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns. And these two guys are going to have to play huge. And you've also got to look for the scrambling ability of a Casey Thompson at the quarterback spot. When you look at the goal for the Longhorns, it should be to let Bijan Robinson be the focal point of the offense. When you look at two of the big losses down the stretch of this season, you look at the OSU game, Oklahoma State, and you look at the Arkansas game, these losses are connected with the rushing attack either being shut down or abandoned too early. When you look at Arkansas early in the season, the Razorbacks defense did a great job of shutting down Bijan Robinson, holding him under 70 yards rushing, and it really put Hudson Card in that offense in a very bad spot, and that Longhorns offense never could find their rhythm. While Oklahoma State, they had a big lead, and all you really had to do was run the ball and kind of control the clock. They only gave Robinson, I believe, like 7, 8 carries in the second half total. When they had a huge lead, when they just had to close the game out, so Steve Sarkisian cannot abandon Bijan Robinson this weekend. He is going to have one of his best games of the season this weekend. And the passing attack for the Longhorns has underwent some changes, especially when Casey Thompson overtook Hudson Card and took this Longhorns offense to another level. They're now averaging over 450 yards per game. They have a top 10 scoring offense with over 41 points per game. And this offense has just reached new heights with Thompson at quarterback, combined with Bijan and some of those playmakers on the outside. But Thompson's completed over 65% of his passes for over 1,200 yards, 15 passing touchdowns, and 5 picks. He's still top 6 in the Big 12 in passing yards. He's first in passing touchdowns already. But the number one thing he has to avoid this weekend, Baylor is top 10 in turnover differential this year. But Thompson is tied for the lead with the most interceptions in the conference right now with Spencer Sanders of Oklahoma State with 5 picks already. He's going to have to protect the ball because if you give Baylor extra opportunities in short fields, they are going to run away with this game in Waco. When you look at Thompson, he has been elite with his intermediate game. That's where he thrives, over an 82 passing grade on those passes between 10 and 19 yards down the field. He counts for almost 500 yards of his total this season, over 11 yards an attempt, 6 touchdowns, 22 first downs generated, and over 30% of his passes come at this intermediate range. And it's going to be key to attack Baylor over the middle in this intermediate range to help out Bijan Robinson. That way, Baylor just can't load the box. Make them respect your passing game if you're Texas. But those are the keys for the Longhorns. I'm going to wrap up the episode talking about matchups to watch. And for me, the one I had to go with was the Texas offensive line against this Baylor front seven, because the Bears are going to have to try to find a way to make the Longhorns one-dimensional. If you take Bijan Robinson out of the game, you have an outstanding chance to come away with the win. And the number one way to slow it down is to take Bijan away and also get after Casey Thompson, force him into mistakes, which is why this matchup is going to be huge this weekend in this game. But when you look at the O-line for the Longhorns, they've been great in the run blocking aspect of their game. That's evident by over 230 yards per game rushing, but they've also done fairly well protecting the quarterback. Only 8 sacks allowed this year, 12 QB hits, but they've allowed almost 60 pressures this season. It all starts with Derek Kerstetter at tackle and Junior Angelo at guard for the Longhorns. They've been the two best, highest graded offensive linemen for the Longhorns. Only 1 sack combined allowed and less than 20 combined pressures for the season. So these guys are playing at an elite level, and they're going to be key this weekend. But they have to also protect Thompson as much as they have to establish the run. When Thompson gets under pressure, he only completes 40% of his passes, less than 300 yards, a touchdown, 3 picks, and a 46.5 passer grade, a steep drop from his over 80 when he's not under pressure. But the Longhorns have done a good job because he's only been pressured on about 30% of his dropbacks this season. They have to keep Thompson clean in the pocket, because if he is pressured all day, he's on his back all day getting hit, it could be a long day for this Longhorns offense. Now, for Baylor, And defensive front has been strong. The Bears are only allowing 137 yards on the ground, less than 4 yards per carry. They're averaging about 3.7 allowed. And another key is that the Bears have a top 20 scoring defense, and it all starts in this front seven where they have a lot of talent. Siaki Ika at defensive tackle, nose guard spot, 3 sacks, 7 hurries, and is the highest graded pass rusher on this Bears defensive line from the interior spot. And then you also have TJ Franklin, Gabe Hall that are having outstanding games. But in the front seven, these two guys who I think are the X factor are Terrell Bernard and Dylan Doyle, the two linebacker spots for the Bears. These guys are X factors. Bernard, for me, is one of my favorite players in the country. I think that's a potential first round pick linebacker. 35 tackles, 3.5 for loss, 3 sacks. He's been banged. He was banged up, had to miss a game earlier this season, but he should be at full strength this weekend. And then Doyle leads the Bears in tackles with 44 tackles, 7.5 for loss, and 2 sacks. These guys are going to be key not only in the run game, and the pass coverage game, they're also going to be key for keeping Thompson in the pocket and potentially making sure nothing explosive gets out of that backfield. So look for Doyle and Bernard to be huge keys for this Baylor's defense and Dave Aranda. Now, the prediction, man. This one was so hard to predict because I feel like, Texas, I feel like they're one of the better 3 loss teams in the country. I mean, when you look at their losses, they could easily right now be sitting with 1 loss only to Arkansas early in the season. They easily could have won Oklahoma and Oklahoma State if they would have just executed a handful of plays here or there. But when I'm thinking of the worst possible matchup for Texas, it's a team that runs the ball well, a team that has a solid defense, and a quarterback who can work off the play action when Texas struggles to stop the run. And that is exactly what Baylor is. Plus, you have a road game in a very great environment down there in Waco, where I think that stadium's going to be packed. They're going to be fired up for how Baylor's been playing this season, especially coming off a bye week and a big win over BYU. So for me, I just feel like the deck is just a little bit too stacked for the Longhorns, even though I think they're a great team that just haven't executed down the stretch. I think Baylor is going to make enough plays on the ground. I think Smith, Ebner, Bohannon are just going to make a play or two more than what Bajan Robinson and Casey Thompson can make on the Longhorn side. I have Baylor pulling out a close win, 34-30 over the Longhorns this weekend in Waco, a 4-point win for the Bears, just covering the current spread as I'm recording. But I got the Bears 34, Longhorns 30. Listen, guys, if you're new, hit that like button on the video, comment your score predictions and analysis and takeaways of the game below. Love to hear what y'all are thinking. Definitely interact with some of y'all. But I appreciate y'all tuning into the Blue Bloods, man. Y'all already know what it is. The best college football content on YouTube. Only ones where you're getting this in-depth preview. You're getting live shows, everything like that. And you can get every level of college football right here on the Blue Bloods. But I appreciate y'all tuning in. Y'all have a great Thursday. But for right now, man, the Blue Bloods are out.